So my name is Ajay Gupta. I come from GE Energy Financial Services. We primarily do equity financing for renewable projects. So Mr. Popley and Dr. Haldia has very aptly, covered in the beginning itself that, innovative financing is the one which comes back. So I think that's very aptly put. And Dr. Haldia also Dr. Haldia and other panelists did talk about various ways in which, either Vinay talked about debt financing and Sanjay talked about rooftop, and we heard Green Bank, and we also heard subordinate debt structure. So I'm going to make it a little simple, and then we can open up to questions. Now, I was just taking I'm maybe a little bit oversimplifying, but the 100 gigawatt of the target in solar, let's take for example. And so it seems like a big target, big number, but it actually is not. Now, what I mean by that is, if you look at, how much of land is required for 100 gigawatt, I was just doing back of the envelope calculation, and I said, okay, with advancements in technology, you can do 4 acres per megawatt, and all you need is a 40 kilometer by 40 kilometer stretch of land, which is about 1,600 square kilometers. And the size of Delhi is 1,484 square kilometers, which is 38.5 by 38.5. So it's approximately the size of Delhi is the land requirement to do 100 gigawatt of solar. Now, what does that mean? Now, unlike wind, wind requires a smaller footprint, so it has its own advantages. There are 9 states primarily in which you can wind. Solar, all 29 states. It's very distributed. And India has, this density is not evenly distributed, so you have more population density around cities. So if you look at that, 100 gigawatt from a land perspective should not be a major challenge, and the government is doing all the right things by bringing in solar parks to help in the process. So that is one thing. So the second is how much money is required. So I did another back with envelope calculation, and I said, okay, let me take 5 crores per megawatt. And what you need, the money requirement there is about $75 billion, which is a huge sum. And I said, okay, let me take a 75-25 debt equity. The requirement from on the debt side would be about $56 billion, and the equity requirement is about $19 billion. I think that $50 billion of debt over time, again, is not too much of an issue. As Vinay covered, that most of the financing is coming from local banks. The problem that is happening there is that money is getting stuck. Typically, this money should rotate. The bank should take the initial construction risk, and then it should go to the term market or the bond market, and ultimately to the retail, as has been covered. That is not happening, and that is because the projects have not been underwritten, keeping in mind that the money has to come back. And that's where I think the problem is. But if we assume that that's going to improve, the 50 billion of debt is also not an issue. What I see as a big issue is $19 billion of equity. Where is that going to come from? And that's where Mr. Popley did cover, and I think they are doing a tremendous job in trying to garner, about $1 to $2 billion that he mentioned. But that's, the government can act as a catalyst. Ultimately, we have to get this money from local as well as international investors. Our developers don't have $19 billion of capital to put into these projects for 100 gigawatt. Now, where will this money come from? And why is it that despite so much of talk, equity doesn't come in? So now I will talk about the concept of shovel readiness. Globally, we fund projects in other countries as well. Typically projects have 3 stages: development stage, construction stage, and then operating stage. Now, what is development stage? Development stage is where you procure land, you get your permits, and you get an offtake arrangement, which is basically a PPA, or power purchase agreement. Broadly, you will say that the project is shovel ready. Not too much of investment is made until then. And then comes the construction stage, where, let's say in solar, you will buy panels, which is like 50-60% of your cost, and you do other work. Now, shovel readiness stage is what international investors require to come in. That is what they need. And that's how projects are funded globally. But unfortunately in India, that shovel readiness has been sort of converted into what we call as coconut readiness. The promoter breaks the coconut and the work starts. And it doesn't, it is not phased out in that manner. The planning is not, and that's what Dr. Haldia just said, that there are two things. One is uncertainty, another is risk management. Now, totally, Dr. Haldia's point is well taken. The uncertainty cannot be totally mitigated, but the uncertainty related to a project, which can be mitigated through proper planning, that needs to be mitigated first. I totally buy that point. Even the risk, all the risks in these projects cannot be mitigated, but the risk that can be mitigated through better planning should be mitigated for international investment to come in. So $19 billion of equity that we need, if we want to invite that, we have to move from the concept of coconut readiness to shovel readiness. Now, last but not the least, coming to the topic of this discussion, innovation. I think everybody has very quietly, very aptly summarized, but I'd like to say one thing. There is asset side innovation, there is liability side innovation. I think asset side innovation is how to do better job of bringing these projects online, structuring these projects in a way that's the asset side. The liability side, which is very simple, which is what happened in global financial crisis as well, is that you pool cash flows in an Excel spreadsheet and then do a synthetic tranching, saying that the first, you have let's say underlying 100 assets, you say first 70% of the cash goes to this guy. So since he has 30% subordination, he becomes AAA. The next 10%, I'm just making numbers here, that goes to another guy, so he has 20% subordination, so it becomes, let's say AA. And the last guy, like the minor spec, 1 to 2 to 3%, was the guy which these securitization structures or CDOs had to find to build this whole foundation. With such weak foundations, the structures ultimately had to collapse. So I think enough has been talked about, and as Rahul also mentioned, none of these innovations are something that have not been tried overseas. We also know that failures have happened, so we can learn from those failures. So we are in a very good position, but I think the focus has to be on the asset side innovation, on how to move from coconut readiness to shovel readiness, how to structure these projects in a manner that they come online, and how, as Mr. Popley said, the money given will also ultimately come back. Once all that is in place, you can do that synthetic tranching and get to what you sometimes call as innovative financing. Thank you so much.